Welcome to a new and last episode of TulipTV on Shaw Multicultural Channel. For the next 4 to 5 weeks, we should remember 3 very important days coming up. The first one is April 29th. That's the official birthday of His Majesty King Willem-Alexander. The next one is May 4th. That's Remembrance Day, of course followed by May 5th, Liberation Day of the Netherlands. We decided to repeat last year's show, which is dedicated to this topic. Our host Barbara Arnold went to the Vancouver Holocaust Education Centre and interviewed Nina Krieger, executive director of that exhibition which was happening there, which was about enemy aliens. Well, Jewish refugees from Germany were interned with prisoners of war from Germany into the same camps, and they were classified as enemy aliens. How's that? Kind of strange situation. Well, and then we interviewed Dr. Robert Krell, Professor Emeritus of Psychiatry. He is a survivor of the Second World War as a Jewish child hidden in Holland. And Bert Norden, a veteran who served in the Dutch army during the Second World War. So, very interesting. Stay tuned and check it out. We will be back.
Right now, the Vancouver Holocaust Centre has on view an exhibit called Enemy Aliens, the Internment of Jewish Refugees in Canada, 1940 to 43. And this exhibit tells a very little-known story of Canadian history about the internment of about 2,300 German and Austrian Jewish refugees in Canada during the war.
That's just fascinating. I looked around a bit, and I think we should walk around and maybe you can explain some of the things we see.
Here's a remarkable case of documents that speak to the attempts to leave Germany and Austria. And these are visas, exit cards, and what this speaks to is all of those that didn't have these means of escape. And often these were the eldest boys of the family. And it's a challenging thing for us to encourage the students who tour the exhibition to think critically about the past and to not take historical perspective, to think about how real the war hysteria was at the time. And by imagining themselves in that time, they can start to realize how the internment was possible, how even though these boys were German Jewish refugees, it was because they were German nationals as well. And it was because of this that they were arrested and interned because they were German nationals, even though that they were Jewish refugees and had been through a variety of tribunals as well. And here we have a suitcase and a backpack that belonged to Peter Oberlander, who became a renowned regional and urban planner of note in Vancouver and really across Canada. And this is the suitcase that he packed up when he was arrested in England, told he'd be taken to the police station for a few hours of questioning. And this is what he had with him. He ended up taking to Canada when he was deported and used actually after his release from internment in Canada. And I think one of the remarkable things about this exhibit is how time sensitive it was. We were able to interview 16 of the former internees for the project. Had we undertaken the exhibition 4 years earlier, we maybe would have interviewed far more. Had we undertaken the exhibition 6 months later, it would have looked different still. 3 of the former internees we interviewed during the project passed away between the interviews and the opening of the exhibition. And another interesting thing about this part of the exhibition is there's symbols, barbed wire, even a suitcase that are normally associated with the Holocaust, which I think students and public audiences are not quite used to associating with Canada. And so in the interactive school tour, which is facilitated by very expert and trained docents, they encourage students to interact with, is this what you associate with Canada? And students have really interesting responses, because on first glance, an image of barbed wire might remind them of a Nazi-occupied country. not Quebec, New Brunswick, Ontario, the sites of internment. Now, the heart of the exhibition is devoted to internee responses to their imprisonment. And we have remarkable traces of creativity, the will to learn, these really pretty remarkable responses given the fact that they were imprisoned, freedom was denied, and there was a great uncertainty about their fate. And in this context, they did remarkable things. And so in this case, we have watercolors, scenes of internment life created on scraps of toilet paper. So this reflects the material conditions of internment, the scarcity of materials with which to make these artworks, and they're very quite somber, solitary scenes of internment.
I think it's wonderful that you were able to put this at the right time, really, together. So thank you very much for showing us around and giving us a glimpse of this. And I certainly suggest if you live in British Columbia that you come and have a look at this exhibition, because it's very, very interesting.
This week we're dedicating the episode to Dodenherdenking, and or as we say in English, Remembrance Day on May the 4th, and as well Liberation Day, Bevrijdingsdag, on May the 5th. And we have some very special guests here today. We have Dr. Robert Krell and Mr. Bert Norden. Let me just introduce a little bit about them before we start our talk. Dr. Krell is survived the Holocaust as a child hidden in Holland, and became a noted child psychiatrist who is very well recognized for his special lectures and research in the psychological trauma that Holocaust survivors and their children endured. Mr. Bert Norden served in 1940 in the Dutch Army during the war in Rotterdam. And he's also a survivor from the, I have to speak here, Zwangenarbeidlager. Do I say that correct?
Yeah.
Harbor labor camp in central Germany. Welcome to you both. Welcome to TulipTV. Really appreciate you taking out the time to talk to us today. I'd like to start with you. You were hidden as a child in Holland. Where were you actually when the war started? And tell us a little bit of the beginning of the war.
Well, as you know, May 10th was the day of invasion. I was not yet born. I was born on August 5th, 1940. And obviously, the events of the first couple of years are out of my awareness, but as far as I was told, the hospital had already, it was in The Hague, Holland, the hospital, Zuidwal, had already been chosen by the Gestapo for one of its headquarters. One of the wings had already become the headquarters. And we, being a Jewish family, of course, went through all that has been talked about and written about with respect to gradually being deprived of all our rights. I imagine that was somewhat tolerable, because I've seen some pictures of me with my parents in those early years, and we're looking well and happy, and then the world crashed. When we received our letter for deportation, which wasn't stated as such at all, of course. It was resettled into the East, and we were to report on August 19th, 1942. So I was then just over 2 years old.
very young. Yes, difficult to remember, probably at that age.
Well, my memory kicks in very soon after that. At age 2.5, I begin to remember just about everything.
Well, we'll talk some more about that in a minute. Mr. Norden, you were obviously a little bit older when the war started. Where were you when the war started?
Well, I was in the army before the war with the Genie troops, and during the war we were stationed in Rotterdam, and then of course on May the 10th the war broke out, and May the 12th, I still remember that day very well, because that was the time when they were shooting down to the Moerdijk, and the projectors, they were going straight over us while we were in the Javapoort by the Kralingse Plas, and for the noise of the projectors going over it was just ear deafening. And just come out of the normal life and get dumped in like that, that's quite a jolt. And then of course, May the 14th, we got a big bombardment, and I survived the bombardment, I came through it, and when that was over, I was in the Kralingse Plas, and then after that, of course, it was only one day, and then we became so-called prisoners of war, which lasted till middle of July, and then we were released and sent home again, which was really exceptional.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and from then on, of course, the normal civil life started again, but my life has completely changed. When I was going into the army, I was going to use my free time to finish my study. Well, of course, that was all in pieces. That was not to be considered anymore. So those were the war days, and from then on we had a long time, which we could talk a lot about what happened after that. And
Well, we'll go into sort of back and forth, because you both had very different experiences during the war, different lives, different
both
generations almost as well. Dr. Krell, you were hidden in a house with a family. You were separated from your own family. I imagine that family almost became more like your own family because you were so young. How was that?
Eventually, yes. Eventually, yes. I mean, it was a series of miracles that happened because my parents decided not to report, and reporting meant going to Westerbork, and from Westerbork to Auschwitz or Sobibor. My father said that he'd seen his friends report to not return, and so my mother spent some time looking for a hiding place, and I was placed with former neighbors in another part of the city who kept me for a certain time, and miraculously my mother-to-be walked in, Mrs. Munich, Violetta Munich, was visiting them on her once annual social visit, a kind of obligatory something. And she asked, who's that? And I said, oh, it's Robbie Krell, a little Jewish boy, and his mother is looking to place him somewhere. She says, I'll take him for a couple of weeks. And kept me for 2.5 years, so I became part
of the family.
Of that family.
I was watching some lectures that you gave, and one of the things you talked about in the lecture was His Excellency Richard Sesberia, former ambassador of Rwanda to the U.S., stated once that memory is the highest and perhaps the most meaningful tribute one can pay to the victims of genocide. Memory is a very powerful thing. What are your thoughts on this? And I'm going to start with you about this.
I feel the memories are there. It's part of history. And history is also for the next generation to learn from. And we should not try to cover up what happened. We should not hold a grudge, but just the same, we should carry on and educate the next generation. Be thankful and grateful that you live here, and look at the sacrifice which so many people have given to make this possible. Therefore, memory is part of history. It's a book, a textbook to learn from for the future.
Absolutely. You agree with this, I think.
Absolutely, of course. Yes. Of course. There's nothing we have left after such an event except our memories. And they are a warning to the future. Had people remembered better, I'm very proud of the Holocaust survivors that I know for having spoken out and kept memory alive.
You, as a psychologist, have obviously
Psychiatrist,
pardon, have worked with lots of survivors.
It's very complicated. Survivors have been able to lead a normal life, but on a parallel track with their traumatic memory, and some actually very actively differentiate between those two because they will never rid themselves of memory. In fact, as a doctor to them, I certainly never had any expectations of cure or anything, but I would encourage them to keep memory alive, because even though some of those memories are absolutely horrendous, and tragic and awful, they often were the only memories they still have of family and good days. So do you want to rid a person, make them a blank slate of some kind? No, you want to encourage it.
The Hongerwinter. You were still in Rotterdam, or were you in the camps by the time the Hongerwinter in 1944, I think?
Hongerwinter did not affect me. I was very fortunate. In fact, in a number of times I brought some food to Amsterdam over the IJsselmeer. At night time we went in a ferry and playing up the stuff, and it happened to be that I had a business connections there for movies, and so that's how we got in contact. And he said, "Oh, can you come over and bring some food?" So we had suitcases full of potatoes and whatever, and that's how we got to Amsterdam. But I was living in the northeast part of Groningen, and that area there was mainly farmers, and I had a lot of friends there. My parents was living right amongst the farmers, and in 1943 all the people had turned in the radios, and those radios was kept in moist locations quite often. What you want to listen to? London, of course. And those radios, they all got a little sick by corrosion. So, and that was, since I was able to fix those radios, so
you were a popular man.
I was in demand. There was sometimes, I still remember one time I was working on the radio on the floor, and there was a whole opening in the floor. There was a butcher's shop, and the SD people came downstairs to check for people in there. It was kind of a minute that I was sitting there holding my breath. But anyway, that was one reason that we had always plenty of food in our place, so it did not affect us.
Your books educate a bit on that. Also, obviously, go more about the psychological trauma, I imagine. I haven't read it. Can you tell us some about the book?
This is a book, And Life is Changed Forever, Holocaust Childhoods Remembered. It's a collection of, I recall, about 24 stories of Jewish children who experienced the Holocaust at different ages. And so I wrote about memory with respect to their age group.
Interesting, definitely. We're in, by the way, in the library of the Holocaust Educational Centre, and people in Vancouver can come and take out a book here if you're more interested in learning some more about the war and the past. I want to ask you, you were in the Zwangsarbeitslager hard labor camp.
It was not by choice that I was there. I was in the later part of 1944, and the SD got hold of me because I was delivering dynamite to the undergrounds, and I built a few transmitters to stay in contact with London. And for some reason, somehow, we had a meeting, and there must have been a mall in that meeting because they got hold of me, and they was trying to get me. And I also was the captain of the Technische Noodhulp in the fire department. And but I knew that they was looking for me, I avoided. So then finally to get me, they put in a false air alarm in the city of Groningen. They knew I would go to the center there because that was my post, and that's what they were waiting for me to cast me in. So I was in jail for a number of months, hearings, and while in the jail, quite often people were called out and they didn't come back. So I don't have to tell you what happened to them. And one day, towards when it was a movement in Normandy, they emptied that jail, which was called Huis of Bewaring aan de Herenstraat in Groningen. And they emptied the whole jail, put them in cars, freight cars, locked the doors, and we were shipped into Germany. And we landed up in Langenstein. And there was a work camp, a later work camp outside, and that's where we were put in. And I was very, very lucky because I was there a very short time, and the work that we had to do is put up splitter walls and 45 degrees angle to the walls to protect the factories, and so if a bomb would fall, they would not destroy the factories. So after a few days, the guards stayed behind, they didn't even come along, and we just went with the foreman, if I may call him like that, and to tell us what to do. And you won't believe it, that foreman, he was saying, when we were doing something, immer langzaam. We were looking for the end.
Slow.
Yeah, go slow. Because he was looking to the end of the war.
Right.
And he befriended me with a restaurant owner who had a radio which could not receive short wave, that was sort of but so I modified the radio so he could listen to London. During the time that I was walking around as a person who was supposed to be in that work camp. That was of course just the last couple of weeks of the war, just before the war. So that was actually, I was, let's say, blessed that he sent me out to the camp. He didn't call me out of myself to be shot. So the camp was my lifeline.
Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is our last Tulip TV show on Canadian television. At least for now. And don't worry, we will be still present in the internet. We have our own YouTube channel, and we will air small, short clips, easy to watch. And of course, I have to mention a few people without whom this project could have never been pulled off. Number one, Katja de Bock, my ex-colleague from Belgium. Well, I'm not from Holland either, and we two decided Vancouver needs a Dutch program. So we went to Shaw Multicultural Channel, and who was right away receptive? Sandra Murphy, executive producer. So thank you to you both. Also, we have to thank Renske Werner, our first host of Tulip TV. Then we had Tom Corbett and Barbara Arnold. Thank you all three very, very much. And of course, a big thanks to the General Consulate and the big staff who were always very, very supportive. And last but not least, to Mark and Mitra. Without you two, nothing would have been here. Thank you very much. Well, that's it, and we will see you in the internet. Bye-bye.
Bye.